clone method. Let's maybe just maybe go back to that handout on Java class design. It is just a method. It is just a method which you normally need in cases where you are dealing with the classes with the mutable instance fields. If you remember, when we looked at the string class, we said the string class is immutable, which means that there is no way of changing the attributes of a string or changing the string itself once it has been created. Right? If you say maybe string s is equal to then in quotes maybe test, there is no way of changing that test object. By change I mean maybe there is no way of maybe adding maybe a 1 after test, so that becomes test 1. There is no way of maybe inserting another character or other characters in that particular string. It doesn't have such mutator methods. It doesn't have mutator methods which can actually change the contents of of an object. Unlike the string buffer method. Unlike the string buffer method class rather, which has quite a number of methods which you can actually use to insert maybe a certain character, right, in a particular object or object string. So we are saying if you are defining classes and your classes have mutable instance fields, or you are defining classes in such a way that maybe the contents of an object can in actual fact be changed. If you look at our employee classes, we introduce some mutator methods like change salary. Right? So if we are given an employee object like E, with a name, salary, hire date, and maybe if that employee object is a manager, they can have an additional field, the secretary name. We are saying if that class is a mutator methods, if it is a mutator methods, you can actually change the contents of an object. We can change the salary of an employee. Right? So if you are defining such types of classes, you need clone methods. You need these clone methods to create copies of an object or a copy of an object. If you have something like this, right? If I create two objects, E1 and E2, I have already created those are objects, E1 and E2. If I maybe come here and then I say maybe employee, maybe I create another one, or I just say E1 is equal to E2 or E2 is equal to E1, right? I can maybe say R is equal to what? Is equal to E1, an object which exists. These two are now aliases. They are now aliases. What that means is that we have two object references pointing to the same object in memory. That is very dangerous in those cases where the objects have got mutator methods or methods which can change the contents of an object. Right? Like in this case, R1 can change the salary of the employee object. Since these two are pointing to the same object in memory, there is a danger because E1 is going to be affected the moment we change the salary of R, because they are pointing to the same object in memory. So that's when we need clone methods, such that when you create objects, you want to create a copy of the object. you want to create a copy of the object such that each of these two reference variables will now be pointing to a separate object. The reason why I left this object is maybe at some point in time I once tested this with him. I think for Java 8 it wasn't giving any problem. That's why I left that. Let me just check something here. If we do this kind of an assignment, then maybe if we say, I think we had a set salary method, right? Let me maybe remove all these other. Okay, I can leave this. Maybe where I'm printing here, I can maybe remove all these other, and maybe right. So here I'm assigning R to E1. If I then say R dot print, right? Then E1 dot print, right? Then I say R dot change salary. What is the current salary of E1? 1460. Right, I change that to 2000. Right? Then I say E1 dot print R dot print, like that. Then I run. Maybe I might need some print line, or need to go and modify my method so that it prints a new line. But otherwise, this is the output. Let me just copy it to this so that maybe you can see. Right. So it's just printing the name and what? Name, salary, and name, salary, and the hire date. Name, salary, and the hire date. This. Let me just format it, but that's not the way the output is actually formatted. Right, name, salary, and hire date. Then name, salary, and hire date. Name, salary, and hire date. So initially we assigned what? We assigned this is E1, right? From our code, that's our E1, which is what? Which is this one, right? We have Jaure Taurai 1460. Then we have this hire date. 2016-9-23, right? Then we started by printing what? Printing R. And then we printed E1. So this is the output that we got. That's R. That's E1. Then after that, we used what? We used R to change the salary, right? But what happened was that it also changed the salary of what? The salary of E1, since the two are pointing to the same object in memory. So I think we now have what? We now have a problem. We now have a problem if we have something like what? Like that. So here if we now print, the salaries are now the same. So we now need maybe to introduce a clone method. Now need to introduce a clone method such that when we do the assignment here, when we say employee R is equal to E1, it will go and create a copy of E1 in memory. It will create a copy of E1, or more correctly, to go and create what? A copy of what E1 is actually pointing to in memory, so that we now have two objects with two different addresses. R will be the reference for the for the copy, and then this one will be pointing to the original object. Such that if you now maybe change the contents of one object, it doesn't affect the other one. So we then need to have what is called a clone a clone method. Need to have a clone method. We already have a clone method which is defined in the superclass object. That is the one that I was trying to call, only to realize that it's actually a protected method. So what we need to do here is to override this method by redefining our own method in the subclasses. We need to redefine our method. Right, so there are certain things that you need to do. Like I have already indicated, we are saying the java.lang.object class contains a clone method that retains a bitwise copy or a shallow copy of an object. Right. If you look at this employee object, it has it's an object, but that object has an object inside the date, because local date is a class. So we have an object inside another object. In most cases, when you are using the clone method, which is defined in the superclass object, which we are saying contains a shallow copy, right? Since inside there we are having We are having another object. When we clone such kind of an object, it will only clone the Clone the variables which are not objects themselves. The ones which are objects, it will retain the address. We'll talk about this when we are maybe after implementing one method. Right. So we are saying this is how it is, what is defined, and I've actually opened the method. Here, that's the method definition. The clone. Right. So what we need to do is to override this clone method. Right. So we are saying not all objects are clonable. Not all objects are clonable. In particular, only instances of classes that implement the clonable interface can be cloned. So that's the first thing that you need to do. You need to make sure that your class implements the clonable interface. I think I had already done that with one of my classes. Just go to the class definition, then you just indicate that it implements a clonable interface. Clonable is a special type of a class which is called an interface in Java, which is a pure abstract class. It is a pure abstract class. A class in which the methods will not be having concrete implementation. It's a purely abstract class. Most of the methods, they will not be having any implementation. You sort of just be having some method headers. That's the class. That is the class. So, in most cases, it will be just a class in which you use it to define the form or structure of your subclasses. That my classes are supposed to have these methods, but without actually implementing those methods, because there will be sort of maybe no way of implementing them in the superclass. But you just need to define the fact. You need to state the fact that this interface, it is going to be inherited by subclasses. And in these subclasses, I expect to have these methods. Then you just list them in the interface. There will be just method headers, like maybe public, void, print, open bracket, close bracket, Then if you take some arguments, then you specify the arguments, then you put a semicolon. After those brackets, you'll be having something. We'll talk about what? About that. We'll be having maybe something like, and all the methods in an abstract class or an interface, they are what? They are implicitly public, so there won't be any need for you to have this public what? So you can say public print, then like this, then you terminate it like that. In most cases, that's what you find inside what are called abstract classes and interfaces. We'll talk about these types of classes. Right, so we are saying not all objects are clonable, but only those that implement the clonable interface. I think there was someone who raised the question about multiple inheritance in Java, and I indicated that Java does not directly support multiple inheritance, where you can inherit from more than one class, like what you can do in Python. Java doesn't support that directly, but indirectly through interfaces. You can extend exactly one class. When you are defining a class like this manager, where we are saying public class manager extends employee, this means that the employee is a subclass of what? Sorry, the manager is a subclass of what? Of employee. Manager is a subclass of employee. What if a manager is also a subclass of another class? You can't extend more than one class in Java. You can't inherit from more than one class. If there is that need, you need to extend one class, then you convert the other ones into interfaces. Then you can implement the interfaces. That's how you realize multiple inheritance. So you can actually say extends employee. Then after that you say implements. Then you specify the interface that you'll be implementing. That's how you inherit from more than one class. That's how you realize multiple inheritance in Java. We'll discuss about these interesting concepts. And you can actually implement more than one interface. So you can say implements clonable, comma, then you have another interface, comma, another interface. You can now implement more than one interface, but you can extend only one class. That's how multiple inheritance is realized in Java. Right, so we're basically saying that if you want to use the clone method, you need to make sure that your class implements the clonable interface. Right, and we are saying if you try to clone an object that does not implement the clonable interface, you actually get a clone not supported exception. You get a clone not supported exception. So you need to just throw that clone not supported exception. Right. So after you have implemented the clonable interface, you then need to You then need to define your Then need to define your clone Your clone method. Right. Then after defining your clone method, you should be in a position then to To clone what has been indicated there. So we are saying most classes in the class library do not implement the clonable interface, so their instances are not clonable. And most of the time, clones are shallow copies. In other words, if the object being cloned contains a reference to another object, like the case of the case of our employee object, where we are saying we have got the hire date, which is not the actual object, but a reference to the actual employee date. Right? So we are saying, in other words, if the object being cloned contains a reference to another object A, then the clone contains a reference to the same object A, not the clone of A. If this isn't the behavior you want, you can override the clone the clone yourself. You may also override clone if you want to make a subclass unclonable. Might want to make a subclass unclonable when one of its superclasses implements the clonable. Because by that concept of inheritance, if you look at the way that I have, if I have not deleted that, if I go to employee, right? If I say here, indicate that, or I indicate that the employee class implements clonable. The fact that, what is that noise about? Huh? What's going on? Huh? Right, I was saying that if this employee class implements what the clonable interface, and then we have got some subclasses like manager, which are inheriting from what? Which are inheriting from this class, right? What then happens is that by the fact that it's a subclass, it is also automatically implementing the clonable what? The clonable interface. But at times you might want maybe only the what? The employee objects to be clonable, but not the manager objects to be clonable. So you still have maybe room to maybe write your code in such a way that you can say that only the superclass employee objects are clonable. The subclasses, you then prevent them from what? From being clonable. That is what we are saying here. Right. So we are saying you may want to override the clone method if you want to make the subclass unclonable when one of its superclasses does implement clonable. In this case, simply use a clone method which throws a clone not supported exception. For example, you can just maybe add a method like this in the subclass. So attempts to want to clone manager objects will actually throw this kind of an exception, and then you get that error message, can't clone a manager. Can't clone a manager. You may also want to override clone method to make it public instead of protected. In this case, you can simply fall back on the superclass implementation. For example, so this is maybe how you can maybe just define your clone method: public object clone, then throws clone not supported exception. Right, the clone not supported exception is in the java.lang package, so you don't need to import anything. Just like the clonable interface, I think I've already indicated that it's in the java.lang package, so you don't need to import anything like other classes that we have used before. Right, then so this is what you just need to do. Just need to have that method in your employee in your employee class. You need to have that method in your employee class. Right, which is this class. Then you just have your method like that. Here you can maybe just you can use even your employee your employee object. You can use your employee object. Right, so with this modification, let me now go to the test bed and then maybe try to apply that clone method. Yes. Yeah, super we're referring to. Yes. Because remember, the moment we do this, if we say implements clonable is a superclass, but it's not a class as such, it's an interface, like I said earlier on. So we now have an inheritance hierarchy. So the immediate superclass of employee is what? is a clonable. And clonable is a subclass of what? Of object. Because all the classes, they inherit from the what? They inherit from the object. So this is now a superclass. Not even though it's not a class, it's an interface, but still the concept of inheritance holds here. We are saying it's what it is. It is a superclass of our employee. So the moment we say implements, we are saying we wanted to acquire the features of what? The features of that particular superclass. Right, let's try one more time. Now what we've done is we are now saying employee E1 dot what dot clone. We want to create an independent object in memory, and then we assign it to R1. We are trying to create a copy of E1, but this copy which will be returned, it will be an object of type object. If you look at the way that this method is defined. Where is it? We are saying it returns what? It returns an object of type object. Where is the method? Right, so here we are saying it returns what? It returns an object of type object. We can't store an object of type object in an employee variable. This is a superclass. I think I have already demonstrated that when I tried to store a manager object in an employee what object. Sorry, when I try to assign a manager reference to an employee object, you get an error. But if what this employee reference is pointing to is a manager object, you can do typecasting and then assign to a manager reference. Right? But here we are saying what is going to be returned internally, it is going to be what? It is going to be an employee object. Internally, it's an employee object. Right? But the reference which is being used here is the superclass reference, which is pointing to what? Which is pointing to a subclass what? Subclass object. So we need to cast it so that we store it in a what? In a manager, rather in a employee what? Employee reference. Right, so after this, if I come here, then so that's the reason why we are casting there. So if I come here, then I run, are there any changes which have not been saved there? I think so. Right, so as you can now see, the last two rows, they are no longer, the salaries are no longer the same. This is the only one which has been changed. The original one has not been changed. That's the clone one. That is the clone method. It is very, very important to have that clone method. If you have a situation where you are going to assign object references, and most importantly, when you have mutator methods. But if you define a class with no mutator methods, you don't need a clone method. But there is no way the contents of an object are going to be modified. So even if you assign 20 object references to the same what value, there won't be any problem because none of these what object references is going to change the contents because you don't have any mutator methods. But the moment you have a class with mutator methods, you definitely need what? To have a clone method. Definitely need to have a clone method.
Yeah, so my question earlier was, before we typecast our clone, can we use that copy, the thing it's nice, typecasted to print an object. Like since it is a copy in string format, it's missing in string representation. Like using it in place of string.
You can't use it. You can't use it. What the toString method does is that it allows you to define maybe how the string, how the object is going to be presented, or maybe output as a string, or how it is going to be sort of converted into a string. But the clone method, what it does is that it actually creates a copy in memory of the object. It creates a copy of the object in memory. The toString is just a method which allows us to maybe just return a string. That allows us to return a string. The copy. Yeah, whether it's in string format or in whatever format, I don't think it's important here. The fact is that we want to create a copy of the object such that these two variables, R and E1, are not pointing to the same to the same object. That's what we want to do here. We use the toString method when we want to print. Here we don't want to print. We want to assign one object reference to another object reference. But we want to do it in such a way that they don't maybe create an alias or end up pointing to the same object in memory because of the dangers that I have actually demonstrated. That's what we are trying to avoid here. Are we together? Huh? Right, I think I demonstrated this with one of the methods. What I did here is, if you look at this method, the clone method, we are saying I defined it. Where is it? I defined the clone method here, and I have indicated that it throws the clone not supported exception in the definition of definition of that method, right? When I now go to the test bed, I need to make sure that I throw the same the same exception. When I go to the test bed, in the main method, I throw, in fact, if there are any exceptions that you throw from this class, when you go to the test bed, you need to make sure that you throw the same the same exceptions. Otherwise, you get some errors, and this is the kind of an error that I got after removing the throws because earlier on it was like this. So when I remove this, this is the error that I am now getting. This is the error that I am now getting. That exception in thread main java.lang.error unresolved compilation problem unhandled exception type clone not supported exception on line package line number 23. Right? So you need to make sure that whatever exceptions you throw in your classes, you also throw them in the in the test bed. You also throw them in the test bed. That's how about if maybe we remove this. All right, it's not important, but here just need to make sure that you throw you implement you implement the clonable here. Just need to make sure that you implement the clonable interface. He's asking, how about if we just throw the exceptions in the main class without throwing them here? You will still get an error. You will still get an error. If I remove the throws clause here, I will get what an error. It's actually underlining that unhandled exception type thrown clone not supported exception. So you can't do that. You need to make sure that whatever exceptions you throw in your class, you also throw them in the main class. Any other questions?